Minutes. All right. We're picking up in the Gospel of Shree Ramakrishna tonight. We're, I think, what is it, M Induction Ishwar 2 or somewhere, Takur Induction Ishwar 2. And we're on Saturday, December 29th, 1883. And jumping in, it was the day of the new moon, auspicious for the worship of the Divine Mother. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna got into a carriage to visit the temple of Kali at Kalighat. He intended to accompany him to the. He intended to stop at Adar's house on the way, since Adar was to accompany him to the temple. While the carriage was waiting near the north porch of the master's room, M went to the master and said, "Sir, may I also go with you?" "Master, why?" M, "I should like to visit my home in Calcutta." Sri Ramakrishna reflected a moment and said, "Must you go home? Why? You are quite all right here." M wanted to see his people for a few hours, but evidently the master did not approve. Oh gosh, I see Prabhudananda right there. You know, me asking if I could take some time off or go visit home. And because in the tradition, to break those attachments, it seemed from the family perspective, it's quite a harsh move. And I've experienced that difficulty firsthand. To renounce family, it's, for the monk, yeah, it's difficult. It hurts. But for the family, like I've seen the pain of my mother over the 15 years of life, of 15 years that I didn't go home. And, of course, most of that was because on the insistence of taking it personally. There was no understanding. I couldn't seem to get an understanding lathered about how, no, this is about a path, a faith, a direction. But anyway, that difficulty, and it's important. It's not a cruel thing, because there's no one that creates your idea of yourself more than your family. And there's no one who will not let go of your identity as much as a family. Every time you go home, you're going to be mama's boy, you're going to be daddy's son, and they're going to talk to you that way, and they're going to treat you that way. And no matter how hard you try, you're going to respond that way, because you've got, 18, 20 years of samskara in your formative years toward that identity. And you can't understand how deep that identity goes until you try and break it. Until you do step away with a renunciation toward it. And so this little piece here, Thakur saw M's potential the first time he met M. Ramakrishna, saw something in him, and was quite stunned when he found out that M was married. And not only was he married, but he had children. And so, it's not problematic, except that it tied him to the world. He couldn't throw his entire self into his faith, into his quest for realization. And the talk.
What did Swami Prabhudananda say when you asked to go home?
No, there wasn't. There wasn't any. It wasn't a discussion. It was like, no. The tradition that he knew, or that we were living by in that monastery, is 12 years traditionally. A renunciate, a monk who's renounced the world, does not go home to his family. Now, that's not that I couldn't see or talk to my parents. My parents came to visit me, and I could return a phone call, and I could answer a phone call. But the only rule was that I was not allowed to initiate contact with anybody outside the monastery. So, and that was such an eye-opening experience. I considered myself a rather popular person when I joined the monastery. I would have a dinner party, and I could easily get 40 or 50 people there with no problem at all. And I moved into the monastery, and that was the only rule, just that one rule. You can't initiate contact with anybody outside the monastery. It didn't take 10 days before I spoke to all my friends for the last time. The only two of my friends that I have left from that period of my life is Bill and Philip, and both of them became Vedantins. So nobody else was willing to do the effort of contacting me first each time, you know. So, so this practice is quite eye-opening. It really shows you where you stand with folks, because that's why Vivekananda talks so much about how our love in this normal world is just mercantilism, you know. It's an exchange. It's not an unconditional love. It's not a love for its own sake. That love really does, probably the only exception is a mother's love, but in our love in this, and even that has its limits. But in this world, that's what's available to us, and that's our opportunity as spiritual seekers. Jesus says, they'll know that they're my disciples by their love. I don't know how well that's worked out so far, but the idea for us is to become great lovers. Our ideal and our pursuit could be described that way. We are studying to be the world's greatest lovers, that we're learning to love with no condition. We're learning to love because it's our nature, it's because what we are, and because it is what we are destined to be. It's the very root. It is the image of the beloved that created us, that divine principle that the mother placed within as our bodies, as our manifestation happened, however you want to talk about it. Yeah, so M was not allowed. It's such a simple thing. He just wants to ride along with Ramakrishna to go see his family. Ramakrishna's like, no. I find it funny just because I have a lot of memories around that with Swami Prabhupada. Even that time that I asked if I could, I'd been in the monastery for 8 years, and Swami had told me when I joined that there was no vacation. And I said, well, why are there no vacations? And he said, well, what does a monk vacation from? What do you need to get away from? That was a great question, but after 8 years, I'd kind of had enough of the daily routine, because the routine doesn't change. It's a grindstone of a routine. It's just, there's nothing interesting. You're never traveling. You're never doing different things. One day is like the same way it was last week, and round and round and round and round and round and round it goes. Just this grinding routine. And it's wonderful for interior work and interior growth, because you have nowhere else to go. Everything else is completely dried up. And so in a way, you really have to develop your inner life and your relationship with the divine, or what else is it going to be? What else could be? There's no other stimulus there. That's really part and parcel of what the monastery is for. It's for grinding that ego down thin enough so that you can see through it and at least get a taste of God, a taste of that beloved divine. So this is why Ramakrishna would be so serious about it, and why somebody that he sees that potential in, would want him to make a little bit of distance and to maintain a little distance. You see, Ramakrishna reflects and he says, do you have to go home? If M had said yes, Ramakrishna would have said, okay, come on in. Because M wasn't a monk, right? So this is a good example that this rule is for householders as well. But it's for the monk, it's an absolute break. For a householder, it's like, just keep it at the necessary level. Don't go beyond what's necessary. Yes.
What is it? It's for householders too. We're not supposed to call our friends. I'm confused.
It's not quite that strong. But yes, to minimize your social life and to minimize your family life, not shirk any of your responsibilities, and not love, and certainly not allow any doubt of your love to enter into the picture, but that everybody knows that you have a discipline, that you keep that social life is not the point of your life, and and really, as you grow in Vedanta, you kind of realize there's really nothing there but entertainment. And and so it's kind of keeping that at a minimum and not letting it control you, because social circles control you. They control your behaviors, they control your activities, they control the things you talk and think about. And so to recognize that and to protect that inner shrine, because that's where our bliss is. That's where our source for the love that we hope to be able to share equanimously with everyone in the world comes from. And if you don't protect that space and you can't get your mind into a silent space, then you don't become aware of that love. And you may like this group of people very nicely, and you may be very nice amongst them, but like Jesus says, so what? Who doesn't like their friends? Your spirituality is measured by how much you love your enemies. And so this is part of that. This is how we go forward in spiritual life. And it is a challenge, and it is a tough teaching, and the ego does want to push against it. I can tell you firsthand, that when I would call my mother, for 10 years, I'll tell you the truth, for 10 years, every single phone call home that I had with my mom, she ended it in tears. And she always took it personally. What's wrong with me? Why am I not spiritual enough? Am I so bad of a person that you can't talk to me? And, and no matter how many times I would reassure, it's like, no, Ma, it's not that. I'm doing something that requires it. It's as difficult for me as it is for you. It has to, for the path I've chosen, and it was my choice and is my choice. This is necessary. And it has never been resolved, obviously. I don't think my mother will ever forgive me for it.
Swami, how does satsang fit into the social life?
How does what?
Satsang?
Satsang. Well, that's holy company, a little bit of a different thing. But even holy company, if it's not holy, if you're getting together with your holy company and you're sitting there chit-chatting about everything else but the beloved, then that's social life also. That also needs to be minimized. You need to cultivate a set of friends that has the same, that is helpful in helping you maintain your spiritual focus, helping you maintain your practice. And so you want people who are of the same commitment, because the world won't understand it. Nobody in the world is going to get behind your spiritual self-control. They're going to be like, oh, why can't you do that? Oh, that's such a silly thing, or whatever the approach will be. It's a very rare non-spiritual person who supports a spiritual person in their efforts if it affects the relationship. And so this is why Thakur, and not just Thakur, all religious history has the same warning. This is how we get conditioned into worldliness. It's unfortunately, family is lovely and family is necessary, and family is a form of worship. So I'm not denigrating those relationships at all. But I am saying that we have to understand that it's because of them that we really believe ourselves to be the body. It's because of them that we identify ourselves with our work, because they've been asking us since we were 3 years old, what are you going to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a policeman? Do you want to be a fireman? None of them, or very rare, is the birth where the parents are, giving you ideas of spiritual life. Although, according to Vivekananda, he said that really what we should teach our children is not the spiritual life itself. He said we only need to make sure they learn two things: one, how to control themselves, and two, how to focus. And he says if you can teach your children how to control themselves and how to focus, Maya will bow down at their feet. This world will bow at their feet. They will have the skills from those two skills, the ability to accomplish anything they want to accomplish. And so, that's what we teach our kids. And then when the kids start asking questions about spiritual life, that's when that's when we really begin teaching them the spiritual life. Until then, we just give them the tools and the background to really find their answers and to go forward. Now, it's good to teach them the traditions, the stories and the inspiring things, to kind of let them know why you made the choices you've made. But we don't need to convince them to follow the same path that we have chosen. Even though they're our kids, they have to have the freedom to learn and to grow and to approach the world in the way that their path dictates for them, in a way that's helpful to them, that may be different from us. So all that from two lines from between M and Ramakrishna. All right, Sunday, December 30th, 1883. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while M was walking up and down under a tree, a devotee came to him and said that the master had sent for him. M went to Sri Ramakrishna's room and found a number of devotees there. He saluted the master. You know, this is one of those things. And whenever I go to India, I salute swamis like that, because when I grew up in the military. My father was an Air Force colonel. And when I read the gospel for the first time, when it says, that M saluted Ramakrishna, I honestly thought, oh, he saluted him, because that's what it meant in my world. And so for a long time, as a joke, because after I learned that that's not at all what this was talking about, I still went around doing it, saluting the swamis when I saw them. All right, so he salutes the master. Ram and Kedar and others had arrived from Calcutta. Ram had brought him with the Vedantist monk whom the master had visited near his garden a few days earlier. On that occasion, Sri Ramakrishna asked him to bring the sadhu to Dakshineshwar. The monk was sitting on a small couch with the master. They were talking happily in Hindustani. This is interesting. This is the second time this weekend where Ramakrishna has had a monk come to visit him, and their conversation was described always as joyful, as happiness. So you can just see kindred souls talking about their divine beloved and just sitting down like a little coffee clutch, just delighted as kids at Christmas to have someone to be able to talk about their deeper insights, their deeper knowledges and experiences, and to kind of just talk at a level that, it's like a computer engineer, hanging out with people who don't know anything about computers. It's like he can't really just go, but he meets another engineer and they're just, off talking about all this nerdy stuff and loving it and just enjoying each other's company. And so for Ramakrishna, it's the same. He meets another monk, another wandering sadhu, and just joyfully has a conversation, just a very deep connection, not on their similarities, but on a common love for truth, common love for honesty and sincerity and earnestness. And at the center of all of that, a relationship with love itself, the divinity. The monk was sitting on a small couch with the master, and they were talking happily in Hindustani. Master, what do you feel about all of this? Monk, it is all like a dream. Master, Brahman alone is real, the world illusory. Well, sir, what is Brahman? Monk, Brahman is the sound. It is Om. Master, but there must be something indicated by the sound. Isn't that so? Because Ramakrishna says that name and form cannot be separated. And that's why the mantra is so powerful, that we practice, because the mantra is God. It doesn't indicate God. It can't be separated from God. So when you say God in the mind, even though the mind cannot comprehend what that is, it lifts the mind, because there is a recognition of manifestation in there. That means something, and it induces it in the mind. So he's saying it is Om, that it's vibration, and that's true all the way down to the root of Shakti, to the world of change, to the world of manifestation. Om, or word, or logos, is the initial seed. It's the vibration that creates this manifested world. And so he's asking the monk, he's saying, well, there must be something indicated by the sound, isn't it so? And the monk says, well, that itself is the thing indicated as well as the indicator. At these words, Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi and sat motionless. Wow, this must have been quite a monk to put Ramakrishna in samadhi with his answer, saying, well, at that level, at that root level, the sound and its indicator are not separate. But that's beautiful. He just went right to the space where there is no Shiva Shakti. There's the unity of Shiva Shakti that's even a step higher than that. So Ramakrishna goes into samadhi and sits there motionless, The monk and the devotees looked wonderingly at him in his ecstatic condition. Kedar said to the monk, "Look at him, sir. This is samadhi." The monk had read of samadhi, but had never seen it before. After a few minutes, the master began gradually to come down to the normal plane of consciousness. He said to the Divine Mother, "Mother, I want to be normal. Please don't make me unconscious. I should like to talk to the sadhu about Satchitananda. Mother, I want to make merry talking about Satchitananda." Here we have incarnation praying not to have samadhi. Can you see how different we are from him? That samadhi was interrupting his enjoyment of the manifest, of the duality of this world. No, I want to talk to the sadhu. Why are you putting me into samadhi? Put me into a normal state. I want to chat with this guy. The monk was amazed to see the master's condition and to hear these words. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Please do away with your I am he. Let us now keep I and thou to enjoy the fun." A little later, the master was walking in the Panchavati with Ram, Kedar, M, and the other devotees. Master to Kedar with a smile, "What did you think of the sadhu?" Kedar, "It is all dry knowledge. The pot has just been put on the fire, but as yet there is no rice in it." The master, "Well, that may be true, but he has renounced everything. He who has renounced the world has already made great progress. The sadhu belongs to the stage of the beginner. Nothing can be achieved without the realization of God. When a man is intoxicated with ecstatic love of God, he doesn't take delight in anything else. Then he sings this song, "Cherish my precious mother Shyama, tenderly within, O mind. May you and I alone behold her, letting no one else ever intrude." Greg put some music to that there. So cherish, cherish God, cherish the divine. It's a chummy relationship. It's not a business relationship. It's whatever relationship you choose, but certainly however you see God in that relationship, it should be something that you would cherish, like I don't know, like a worldly man cherishes a family heirloom, or something, or a woman cherishes her engagement ring. It should be along those lines, that we should cherish our relationship with God. It should be our special thing. Like, we really love it. We protect it. We don't let the world and our daily routines and whatnot take it away from us, to take it out of our mind, to get lost in the mundane, and to forget the only thing making all of this beautiful, the only thing making all of this worthwhile is this love, and divine God, love, pure, unconditioned, that this is our joy. And when we've done enough clearing out of the noise in the mind, we come to realize that this is the thing, this is the one treasure that is worth running out and selling everything else in order to get. Because this one doesn't decay, this one doesn't disappear, this one doesn't rot. Every other relationship is with something that will rot. And so, yes, I just called your best friend something that will rot. But know this and be aware of this. This is your treasure. This is your joy. Don't put your meditation aside to go have coffee with your best friend. Bad decision. Understand, this is the treasure that you get rid of everything else for, because it is the one that will be laying in the old folks' home next to you one day. This is where you will find your joy. This is where you will find your bliss. It is the one thing real that will be there when your time comes. And cherish that, love that. And it will take away your fear. It will take away your loneliness. It will take away your sorrow at having lost everything to old age, which all of us do and all of us will. And so prepare the inner room. Prepare your what does Ramakrishna call it? The drawing room. right? The shrine, what I call the shrine, Ramakrishna calls it the drawing room. That's where you meet God. When you go into God's house, you sit in the drawing room of the heart to have your conversation, to have your communion, to have your time with the divine. Kedar repeated the words of the song in keeping with the master's feeling. How shall I open my heart, O friend? It is forbidden me to speak. I am about to die for lack of a kindred soul to understand my misery. Sri Ramakrishna returned to his room. About 4 o'clock, the door of the Kali temple was opened, and the master walked to the temple with the monk and accompanied them. Entering the inner chamber, the master prostrated himself reverently before the image. The monk, with folded hands, also bowed his head and repeatedly before Kali. Master, what do you think of Kali? Monk, with devotion. Ah, Kali is supreme. Master, Kali and Brahman are identical. Is that not so? Monk, as long as one's mind is turned to the outer world, one must accept Kali. As long as a man sees the outer world and discriminates between good and evil, he must accept good and reject evil. To be sure, all names and forms are illusory, but as long as the mind sees the outer world, the aspirant must give up lust. The ideas of good and evil are applied to one who is still a student on the path. Otherwise, he will stray from the path of righteousness. Thus, conversing, the master and the monk returned from the temple. And oh my gosh, this is a very important point, especially to our Advaitin friends, right? I run into this a lot these days, especially here in Colorado. Advaita is very popular, this one without a second, but an understanding of it is missing almost completely because people very casually announce that they are a knower, because they know this oneness of all things. I'm already realized, I've actually heard 2 or 3 times, just people that I've encountered make that statement about Advaita. But as long as you see an outer world, as long as you believe as long as you get up and shower a body, as long as you get up and feed that body and go by your name, you have to obey the injunctions of the scriptures, the yamas and the niyamas, the do's and don'ts. Why? Because that egoism, which is the cause of what you see, the cause of not being able to see reality as it is, you are trapped into seeing it as the mind tells you it is. And the mind is dual. The mind needs subject-object relationship in order to conceive of anything. And this is the reason that we can't say anything about God. We can't say anything about Brahman, the unmanifest, because to say even one word requires you to place God within time, within past, present, and future, and within the world of time, space, and causation. And so not even a word can be said about God because simply the divine is outside of all of that, the container of all of that, as it were. Because anytime you say anything particular about God, you have to add that and more to it. You can't just stop. God is the universe and more. So like that, so that we never put a boundary on the divine. And it's very different, in that. And so anyway, the important point here is to know that if you are going to claim a realization, that you should be able to experience samadhi. You should be able to have that experience if you're going to make claims to that level of realization. That it's not just a philosophical understanding of the world that you say, oh, all things are one, right? It has very large implications. That should be recognized and should be honored, because if you don't see that and don't understand that, you can get yourself into a terrible state of delusion, a state that's very difficult to get out of, because the ego loves the idea of being realized, would love to identify itself as being a seer, right? And quite often that happens. And again, it gets even worse. You become a teacher believing that you've got a realization, but it isn't there. It isn't there. And it's an innocent mistake. but it's one that Thakur here is making sure we don't make. Right? Yes, so he says the ideas of good and evil are applied to one who is still a student on the path. Otherwise, he will stray from the path of righteousness, right? Because if you are God, if you don't understand what that means you have no desire. If you're God, if you see yourself as God, the Tattvamasi, there's no good and evil for you. And if you don't understand that, you take it as license. That means I'm God. I can do anything. I can be anything. And it's true if you really know it's true and not in a mental knowledge. This is one of those gnosis, one of those knowings inherent to the self. Thus conversing, the man and the monk returned to the temple. The master to M. Did you notice that the sadhu bowed before Kali? M. Yes, sir. And why was that so amazing? Because when the sadhu said that this world is an illusion, that kind of suggested that he was a jnani, that he was on the path, the Advaitin path, that he was going inside and doing discerning and doing neti, going inside and discerning between what changes and what does not, and only being interested in what does not change and renouncing everything else and constantly doing that practice. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Because in the end, you are Tattvamasi, I am God, I am that. But since God does not have an attribute, you can't approach it. It's not healthy to approach it that way because the ego collects attributes. And if you have that practice of repeating, I am that, I am that, I am that, or I am he, I'm he, I'm he, if you haven't done the yamas and niyamas, your ego is very strong and it's absorbing that sense of I am God and messing you up horribly. Right? And so he was quite impressed because the man was on a jnanic path, and usually they don't respect the personal God. They're not interested in a Jesus or a Buddha or a Rama or a Kali or a Shiva. They're interested in that, the unnameable. And so it was significant that this monk was a jnani, but yet saluted with devotion, we even read, Kali, the Divine Mother. Monday, December 31st, 1883. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the master was sitting in his room with M, Rakal, Latu, Harish, and other devotees. Addressing M and Balaram, the master said, Haladhari followed the path of knowledge. Day and night he used to study the Upanishads, the Adhyatma Ramayana, and similar books on Vedanta. He would turn up his nose at the mention of the forms of God. Once I ate from the leaf plates of the beggars. At this, Haladhari said to me, how will you be able to marry your children? Because that in Indian culture, that would have broken caste, that to eat off of the beggars' plates would have made Ramakrishna impure. And so Haladhari's making a horrible mistake right here in forgetting for a moment Ramakrishna's renunciation and his monasticism, which is interesting because Ramakrishna was both a monk and a householder. He met the requirements for both of them. He married Sri Sharada, and they never consummated in the marriage, and he renounced the world and took the ochre. He didn't wear the ochre cloth, but he took those vows. Became a sannyasin. So he is the incarnation for everybody. And he shows you, that being a householder is not a disadvantage to your path. You are responsible for your own realization just as much as any monk. And you have the potential of that realization just as much as any monk. And the ego wants to argue with that, because you don't want that realization or you don't want that responsibility. But you have to understand it's grace by which we realize the divine. It's by grace. And your absorption in that grace through the path of bhakti, anyway, is your avenue to your freedom, to accept the love of God, this unconditioned love. Because to fully accept grace, to fully accept the gift from the mother, you have to have done a significant amount of ego reduction, because you have to come to the place where you just know you could not get that on your own. It's like if somebody gave you a gift, if somebody came to you and you're a regular 9 to 5er, and this person comes to you and gives you a piece of jewelry that's worth $5 million. How can you accept that, right? You'd be like, oh my God, I can't accept this, right? That ego has to be completely effaced, and we have to embrace the gift from the divine, knowing that it is way beyond our star, that we really couldn't accept it under any other condition except the conditions of pure grace. So, yes, once I ate from the leaf plates of beggars, and at this Haladari said to me, how will you be able to marry your children? Because nobody would accept them. You've broken caste. I said, you rascal. And rascal is a much stronger word in the interpretation here than what it is to us as Americans. Rascal, we think of the little rascals, kind of kids' mischief. But you rascal was kind of a very direct statement. You rascal, shall I ever have children? May your mouth that repeats words from the Gita and the Vedanta be blighted. Just fancy. He declared that the world was illusory, and again would meditate in the temple of Vishnu with a turned-up nose. In the evening, Balaram and the other devotees returned to Calcutta. The master remained in his room, absorbed in the contemplation of the Divine Mother. After a while, the sweet music of the evening worship in the temples was heard. A little later, the master began to talk to the mother in a tender voice that touched the heart of M, who was seated on the floor. After repeating Hari Om, Hari Om, Om, the master said, Mother, don't make me unconscious with the knowledge of Brahman. Mother, I don't want Brahma Jnana. I want to be merry. I want to play. And he said, Mother, I don't know the Vedanta. And Mother, I don't even care to know. The Vedas and the Vedanta remain so far below when thou art realized, O Divine Mother. Then he said, O Krishna, I shall say to thee, eat my child. Take this, my child. Not eat my child, but eat, my child. Take this, my child. O Krishna, I shall say to you, my child, thou hast assumed this body for my sake. You see this delight in the master. And you also see something very important here. He says, Mother, I don't want Brahmajnana. I want to be merry. I want to experience joy and the bliss in your company, right? Look at that wonderful permission this gives you. It's not that you're not allowed to enjoy your being, that you're not allowed to enjoy the world. It's not that there's anything wrong with enjoying being here, but enjoy it through this framework, through the seeing everything is pointing at your beloved mother. We went up on that beautiful hike on Sunday, and you look out at that gorgeous view. And if you look at that gorgeous view from the worldly perspective, you wish you could take it with you. You want to grab it, you want to own it, because you're looking at the thing itself. We don't want to appreciate the thing itself. We want to see that majesty and that beauty and that wonder, and we want to look right through it and recognize the person behind it. Who is it that is beauty itself? Who is it that is majesty itself? And of course, they're loaning it to this mountain, and showing it to you. It's a gift to you, a gift of the mother of herself to you. This is my majesty, my sweet. This is my richness, my beautiful. This is my wonder. And so if you take that, you have it, right? You don't need to take the mountain home. You've got this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful imprint of the presence of God, and taken the gift of that beauty, which changed your inside, brought you to a moment of silence, right? That's what majesty does. That's what awe does. You sit there and you just look at it. You're like, what is that? It's the silencing of the mind and the relief that the soul feels at the silencing of the mind for a moment in the presence of beauty, the presence of wonder, and the presence of majesty. And so this is what he's talking about. I want to be merry. I want to play. This is your play. This is God. We are surrounded and inundated by God. To enjoy it as such is a blessing. It is the point of life, because that's realization. That's what leads us toward the knowing. right? Leads us toward the knowing, takes away the delusion. So enjoy this world deeply. It's what Vivekananda says. He says, religion is not here to take away your enjoyment of the world. That religion is here to teach you to enjoy the world, but how to do it so that you don't get caught, so that you don't get entangled. You don't fill yourself with regrets and anxieties and fears and lonelinesses and depressions. Enjoy the world in the way that it was meant to be enjoyed, by seeing and relating to and dancing and playing with the divine behind it all. And if you dare to step your foot in that direction, I can tell you that that is the way. Take the step onto the water. Don't look at the water and imagine that you can walk on it. Step on it. Go out and test these things, play with these things, understand that these are realities, that the divine has a beautiful relationship with you, and that everything that you casually walked by today and maybe didn't even notice contained innumerable lessons for you, inspirations for you, instructions for you, hope for you, signs of freedom for you. And so enjoy this world by walking through it and accepting the gifts of love that come from everywhere, the beauty, the majesty, the wonder, even the challenges, because the challenges are always because of an ego boundary somewhere, an identity problem, an attachment. And even those are gifts, making you aware of your attachments so that you can transcend even that, right? So that you can experience an unconditioned bliss, a bliss that is always at home in the heart, always present in the drawing room of God, where you sit and have your tea together during your practice. Yeah, so Krishna, I'll say to you, you, my child, you have assumed this body for my sake. Right. Wednesday, January 2nd, 1884. Recall that Latu, Harish, Ramlal, and M had been staying with Sri Ramakrishna at the temple garden. You see, as an example, what we always talk about, and those who went on the retreat, every now and then take some time to get away from your phone, away from family, away from friends, away from TVs and internets and computers and jobs and pagers and text messages. Get away for a few days and just spend it with God. Spend it with God. Learn to see the beloved strengthen your inner world by shutting everything down that pulls you into that outgoing perspective, where the mind is always looking at the changing, and train yourself to turn that outgoing mind inward. Why? Because you become aware of your divine bliss that way. You become aware of the divine presence. You stop seeing and feeling separate from the whole, separate from God. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, M found the master on the west porch of his room, engaged in conversation with a tantric devotee. The tantric was wearing an ochre cloth. Sri Ramakrishna asked M to sit by his side. Perhaps the master intended to instruct him through his talk with the tantric devotee. Mahima Chakravarti had sent the latter to the master to the tantric. It is a part of the tantric discipline to drink wine from a human skull. The wine is called karana, isn't that so? Tantric, yes, sir. Master, but I can't touch wine at all. Tantric, you have spontaneous divine bliss. One who enjoys that bliss wants nothing else. Right? There was a woman whose husband used to beat her. Terrible example. But there was a woman whose husband used to beat her when he would get drunk, and she would come to the master every time, to take refuge. And so the master tells her, oh, bring your husband here. And she's like, my husband will never come here. And he says, well, tell your husband if he comes here, I will give him the wine. I will give him the bliss or the drunkenness that he will never need another glass to maintain. And so ultimately, the husband does come and he becomes a devotee, and that woman is saved from her horrible situation. So the tantric understands, yeah, well, you don't want wine because you've already got the thing, right? Master, I don't care for japa and austerity. You know, this, if anybody ever wonders why I fell in love with Ramakrishna, you have to know, how much I rely on these words. You have to know, I want to play, I want to be merry. You know? This other stuff in here, he's saying, I don't care for jopam and austerity. Gosh, who hasn't felt that? Like, oh God, I have to sit here and do my jopam now. All right. You know, you set your timer and you've got that timer running in your head, like, oh God, when this can be finished? Sometimes in the beginning, it's never like that later on. But I don't care for jopam and austerity, but I have a constant remembrance and consciousness of God, right? So then you read that and you're like, how did you get there? Oh, well, jopam and austerity. Right? And why is it actually jopam and austerity that give those things to you? No, it's jopam and austerity that make you aware of those things being yours. That's the thing. It's not an earning and a getting by how many times you count your beads or how long you spend in meditation. Not at all. It's just you becoming aware of this inner world, this inner beauty, this inner richness. That it's the it's you know, we always think it's what we do that make us valuable, and it's always what we are that makes us beautiful. And that's true in the sense, if you know what you are to be what you are and not something you've become, that's true. But you are beautiful because of this infinite love, the potential of that within you, this divinity in you. And that is a given that never goes away. And that means you as a person can always be loved, can always be respected. Tell me, when they speak of the 6 centers, what do they mean? The Tantric. These are like different holy places. In each of the centers dwell Shiva and Shakti. One cannot see them with physical eyes. One cannot take them out by cutting open the body. M listened silently to the conversation. Looking at him, the master asked the Tantric devotee, can a man attain perfection without the help of Bija mantra or a sacred word from the guru? Tantric. Yes, he can, if he has faith in the words of the guru. The master turned to M and said, drawing his attention, faith, right? Faith. And what is faith? You know, faith is that intuitive knowledge of an eternal relationship that we have inside. We should never be able to understand what immortality means, because there's nothing in the material world, right? We've said this. Faith is knowing things that shouldn't be known, right? It's not believing something without any evidence for it. That's not faith. Faith is you knowing the things that you brought into this world that you could not have learned from this world. And what are they? An unconditioned love. You will not experience that in this world. And so faith is believing you that because you have a knowledge of it, if you had never seen it, no one could show it to you, and it's not demonstrable in this world, then we usually don't know anything of it. We don't even think about it. But all of us know unconditioned love. We're all looking for it. We can hear it in all of our arts, right? So that's faith, to put your faith in the existence of an unconditioned love, which means your faith in God. Those are synonyms, unconditioned love and God. Put faith in your immortality. I've never been born. I've never died. Why? Because I can understand the word immortality, even though nothing in this material world could teach me about immortality. And yet I know of it. And yet I long for it. How is that possible? It's possible through faith, right? Infinity, our own infinity, the idea of one without a second, that unity, we understand it. We're attracted to it. We know of it. But none of that knowledge could come from this world. And so faith is putting your being willing to stand on, let's say it that way, being willing to stand on these things that cannot be demonstrated by the world. And yet the fact that we know them and understand them, this is faith, to build a life around those values, around that knowledge. Yes, faith in the words of the guru. The master turned to M and drawing his attention, faith. After the Tantric devotee had taken his leave, Jai Gopal Sen, a member of the Brahmo Samaj, arrived. The master talked with him. Master to Jayagopal. One should not harbor malice toward any person or any opinion. This is one I have to practice a little bit. One should not harbor malice toward any person or any opinion. The believers in the formless God and the worshippers of God with form are all, without exception, going toward God alone, right? So all religions are going toward God alone by whatever name, whatever manifestation. If you look at the root of it, the mystics of all of these religions eat together. The mystics of all of these religions are best friends, right? It's the ignorant practitioners who are still under the control and sway of egoism that draw the boundaries and look over the fence with their nose upturned at everybody else. But that person who sees and understands the nature of God, that understands the nature of the divine love that we're called to, that we're inspired by, that person does not have any of these feelings toward others who are also moving toward God in a different way. And he says, without exception, right? Without exception. The Jnani, the Yogi, the Bhakta, all without exception are seeking him alone, right? The Jnani would be an example, would be like Buddhism, if you want to broaden it outside of the realm of Hinduism. You've got Jnani, which is, the Buddhist, the Yogi, the Bhakta, Christians, the Muslims, those are the Bhaktas. All without exception are seeking him alone. The follower of the path of knowledge calls him Brahman. The yogi calls him Atman or Paramatman. The Bhakti calls him Bhagavan. Further, it is said that there is the eternal Lord and his eternal servant. Jayagopal, how can we know all paths are true? Master, a man can reach God if he follows one path rightly. Right? So you have to select a path, even though all paths are true. That doesn't mean you treat it like the Sunday buffet, where you just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. No, I don't like that one. I won't take any of that. I'll take more of this though. I'll have 3 helpings of ice cream. Right? You can't do that. That is a man who is a disciple of his ego. And a man who is a disciple of ego, practices just the ones he likes and leaving out the ones she doesn't like, that person is going to become a great egotist, a great sensualist, but is not going to realize God. So he says a man can reach God if he follows one path rightly. Then he can learn about all the other paths. It is like reaching the roof by some means or other. Then one is able to climb down by the wooden or stone stairs, by a bamboo pole, or even by a rope. A devotee can know everything when God's grace descends on him. If you but realize him, you will be able to know all about him. You should somehow meet the master of the house and become acquainted with him. Then he himself will tell you how many houses he owns and about all of his gardens and his government securities. Right. We'll stop there for today. But this notion of get to know God first, choose a path and get some distance down the way before then you broaden up and begin studying everything else. Because if you do that, then you find that everything else supports the inner feeling that you have developed by wandering down your path some distance. At the beginning, you don't have that thing that everything else will endorse. And so the variety will cause a distraction. It'll cause a shallowness, like trying to dig a well. Ramakrishna says, if you dig 5 feet in one place and don't find water and get discouraged and abandon that and go try somewhere else, then go try somewhere else, you've dug 15 feet of well and you haven't hit water. But if you had stuck in one place and dug 15 feet, you would have gotten water. And so this is the way that we manage this knowledge that all religions are true.